Hello and welcome to Get in Tune with your Cloud Cyber Resilience Strategy. Today's webinar is sponsored by Rubrik and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech, and I am excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's great content, we do have a few housekeeping items that are going to help you get the most out of this session. Let's talk questions. We want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. Now, we're trying to keep this session to about 30 minutes, and we've got a lot of information and demos to get through, so we might not get to a dedicated Q&A session at the end of this one, but in that case, we will pass along any questions that you have to the team from Rubrik for follow-up. The Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, and slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, just let us know in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Okay, next, handouts. In the handouts section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources. I'd especially like to call your attention to a link to learn more about Rubrik. There are also some links labeled ATM, which stands for Actual Tech Media. One of those is the ATM Decisions Group. That's a panel of IT decision makers that you can apply to join to participate in some more in-depth events and other opportunities. Also, there's a link to the ATM Events Center, which has our calendar of more upcoming events like this one. So I encourage you to access those resources now and feel free to share them with your friends and colleagues. Now, I'm sure you noticed the prize icon there. At the end of this webinar event, we'll be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. Official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find the prize terms and conditions link there. Okay, with that housekeeping out of the way, let's get to today's fantastic session. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to our presenters today from Rubrik. We have Louis Ferreira, who's Vice President of Cloud Sales and Go-to-Market. And we have Bill Gerling, a go-to-market tech and principal cloud architect. So I'm going to turn things over to Louis to get us started.
All right, I'll go ahead and kick it off. My name is Louis Ferreira. I'm here with my friend Bill Gerling at Rubrik, and we're excited to talk to you all today about getting in tune with your cloud cyber resilience strategy. We appreciate everyone spending some time with us today. This is what we'll go through. So we'll talk about Rubrik in general for folks that might not be familiar with our company. And we'll talk about the challenges that we solve for in the enterprise cloud space and around data resiliency and ransomware recovery in the cloud. We'll talk you through Rubrik and our offering and all the goodness and capabilities with our platform. And then Bill Gerling will walk everyone through a demo and tech deep dive of the solution. And from there, we'd love to stick around and take some Q&A. All right, so with that said, I'll jump into it. Bill and I have both been with Rubrik for about 7 years, and we've been very close to this cloud product line. We've taken this from a beta product to now thousands of customers and have a tight line with product management. We're excited to share the journey with you today. In general, Rubrik is a data security company, and we help customers recover their environments from large-scale ransomware attacks. And we've grown really fast. So just some quick background on our company. Rubrik's about a 10-year-old company. And as of this year, we just reached almost $1 billion in subscription ARR. We have about 6,000 customers globally that span, really everywhere in the world and across every major vertical. So we've grown really fast. And I'm going to talk about, kind of why this has happened and what our platform, entails. Another super exciting thing is we just did an IPO at the end of April. We were the first, cybersecurity SaaS company to do an IPO in over 3 years. So we're really excited about that, and we feel like we have some amazing tailwinds that allow us to continue to invest in our product and delight our customers. So I want to take folks through just the journey of Rubrik in general and sort of where we started and how we've pioneered into this data security space. When Rubrik came to market in 2014, we had a next generation backup and recovery software that we scratch wrote. And there was a lot of innovation we brought to a very legacy market at that time, where we wrote an immutable file system that was append only. So in a cyber attack, a bad actor can't go in and encrypt or delete backups. It was all built on a REST API, so you could easily automate Rubrik with tools like ServiceNow and vRealize. and it plugged into cloud and could seamlessly push data into AWS. So we were the only game in town at that point that had a simplified backup solution that was sort of better, faster, cheaper. It tied into AWS, and that's how we took the market by storm and got our first, call it 1,000 customers. And then about 5 years ago, we built what is our core platform now called Rubrik Security Cloud. And this is our SaaS control plane that allows you to orchestrate and manage data protection, cyber recovery, some of the advanced security workflows we have across not only on-prem, but in the public cloud. So we brought the same, resilient, secure, immutable capabilities that we delivered on-prem into the cloud and allow customers to manage that from one control plane. And about 4 or 5 years ago, we started building additional security tools on top of our core platform that allow customers to gain additional insights in a ransomware event. So part of our core value prop is that when Rubrik takes a backup, regardless of the service we're protecting, whether it's a VM in a data center, whether it's an on-prem database, whether it's a Microsoft 365 user, all of the metadata is indexed and categorized. And we can have the data tell you what's happening to it in a cyber attack. So if you're hit with a ransomware attack, Rubrik can literally tell you what is the blast radius of the attack, like what was specifically impacted, what data sets, was there any sensitive data leaked as a result of that attack? We can make sure that when you go do a recovery that we quarantine the ransomware so you don't reinfect yourself. And lately we've made a big investment into data security posture management to understand more proactively what users are doing with data to mitigate and shrink the attack surface. So this is our journey in general. We're going to double click into cloud today, but thought that would be helpful as just a baseline so folks know what Rubrik is and kind of where we started and where we are now as a leader in the data security space. All right, so let's get into cloud and talk about some of the challenges we solve for. And here's what Bill and I see on a daily basis. We speak to dozens of customers every week. Most customers like you are using a wide breadth of services that spans across multiple cloud platforms, right? There's different hyperscaler services, there's SaaS, you have on-prem, and the core challenge is it's really hard to get visibility as you scale, and it's really hard to understand where sensitive data exists. Specifically in the cloud, something like 70% of all cloud data is unstructured data, and it's really hard to understand in a massive multi-petabyte S3 bucket, who has access to the data? What are they doing with it? What kind of data is in there? Same thing with a 365, OneDrive instance, right? What are the users doing with the data? And when you look at recovering and protecting data in the cloud, the default is that a cloud service is spun up and folks just turn on AWS backup or they turn on Azure backup and then off they go build the next service. Meanwhile, the on-prem team's using something different. You're probably using a different recovery tool for SaaS. And all of it's interconnected. So in a cyber attack, according to Gartner, it takes about 60-70% longer to recover cloud data than on-prem because it requires the involvement of multiple teams using different tools. This is all a problem because the data in the cloud is now under attack. So hackers know this is where customers are running mission critical workloads. What we say at Rubrik is these bad actors are now logging in. So they're no longer breaking into the environments, they're logging in by stealing cloud credentials, gaining access, moving laterally, and doing malicious things. And then you're being asked by your internal stakeholders, your board, auditors, how do we recover from ransomware in the cloud? We probably have runbooks to do this on-prem. We've probably tested it, but in the cloud, it's a little bit more fragmented. It's a Wild West. There's different application owners. It's really hard to prove that we can go recover 100 AWS accounts or Azure subscriptions if we're hit. Who owns the recovery? So unlike on-prem, there's different data owners in the cloud. And, is it the cloud architect that owns the recovery pattern? Is it an application owner? Is it a central cloud operations team? So there's often a lot of finger pointing with who has to recover the data in that event where you're hit with a cyber attack. And then from a security perspective, how do we understand what our sensitive data landscape is? How do we give our security team an inventory of what data is most likely to be stolen in an attack, and how do we rank that? So these are all the challenges we solve for that you're probably being asked about now. And when we double click into backup, what I'll start by saying is Rubrik fundamentally goes in and we replace the cloud native backup tools. And the reason we do that is there's a lot of advantages around risk reduction and cost reduction, and there's a lot of challenges with AWS backup and Azure backup. And I want to double click and just walk you through what we see with most customers here. When you look at cloud backup tools, the way they work is you have to go in, you have to literally provision these components we're showing you in red. You have to set up backup jobs, layer on some kind of visibility tool. The recovery is all done at an account level. And from a cost perspective, most customers spend somewhere between 10 to 20% of the overall cloud bill on backup. So if you're spending $5 million a month with AWS, you can bet that you're spending probably $500,000 to $1 million a month just to back the data up. It's a significant cost. And this is all at every account level. Most customers have dozens or hundreds of accounts. So you end up quickly sprawled. You have lots of regions, lots of management points. And most folks, this is a challenge in one cloud. Most people are operating across multiple clouds, and you can't use Azure backup to protect things in AWS and vice versa. So there's a couple challenges here. One is just lack of visibility and control into getting what we call a baseline backup. So a lot of customers come to us and they say, hey, how do I know that as my cloud architects are spinning services up in the cloud, that they're tying some kind of backup to it and that the data is protected and that we know we have like a golden copy of it somewhere? How do we prove to our security team we can go recover this in a cyber attack? These sort of challenges. And I'll now go into Rubrik and how we solve for them. But again, wanted to show everyone sort of what you deal with at scale. And even for those on the line that might only have one or two cloud accounts today, you'll quickly end up in this picture as you grow and scale. All right, so let's talk about Rubrik Security Cloud. Our core value proposition is unification of all of the data protection and all of the cyber recovery to one control plane in Rubrik Security Cloud. So the way you protect an AWS S3 bucket is identical to how you protect an Azure VM, is identical to how you protect a GCP project or a 365 user. We give you a standardized workflow to run the data protection scheme, which we do through an SLA model. And then from a security perspective, Rubrik ensures that all the data is locked down. So we take backups of cloud resources, they're immutable. There's a few different workflows we use to accomplish that, to isolate the data, out of the identity boundary. But just know that like if you're hit with a ransomware attack, the recovery scheme is identical. So you have that standardized way to go in, push the red button and get data back quickly. And then all the data is made immutable. It's also really flexible because you can integrate these workflows with tools like Terraform and any of the other infrastructure as code tools your cloud developers might be using to deploy services. Rubrik seamlessly integrates with that. So we give you this fundamental value prop of like unification, simplified operations, and then we can extend as much or as little of that to your cloud developers as you want. So that's Rubrik Security Cloud in a nutshell. And I'm going to go a click deeper now into how this all works under the covers, and then I'll flip it to Bill to show a demo. So peeling back the onion a bit, when Rubrik connects to your cloud accounts and subscriptions, we do so with an API-based connection from Rubrik Security Cloud. We don't store your credentials. And the first thing you get with Rubrik is you get heads-up visibility of where all your sensitive data lives. So Rubrik will show you like, okay, in your Amazon environment, you have 1,000 objects, and Rubrik is seeing that there's this 200 objects over here that look sensitive based on dozens of scanners we run that you can also customize that go out and find and scan your estate for sensitive data. The benefit of this is you can see, hey, is there data out there that users are accessing that they shouldn't? Do we have redundant data in our environment that we can either eliminate altogether to reduce the cost and shrink our attack surface? Workflows like that. So we give you like a heads up inventory so you can see what you got everywhere. And then the second thing we do is we marry that together and contextualize that with what the users are doing. And we monitor that over time for suspicious activity. So we can show you like, hey, is there someone in HR that has access to this sensitive, accounting file that they shouldn't? Let's lock that access down to, again, shrink the attack surface and proactively mitigate the data theft risk. And this gives you a good, ransomware posture for a hacker logging into your environment, moving laterally and starting to steal data. So we take an inside out look from a data perspective and help you reduce risk around, that with these capabilities, which Bill will show you. And then from a data recovery standpoint, anything you deem critical to back up or anything you're backing up today with native tools will immediately simplify and reduce the risk around that. By creating immutable backup copies, you have a lot of flexibility in how you want to replicate those and recover them. We're just calling cloud APIs, so the recoveries happen really fast. And again, we can give you that observability to understand if you're hit with an attack in the cloud, was there sensitive data that was leaked? Is there anomalous activity going on, in an EC2 instance or what have you, to minimize operational, disruption and answer the tough questions. Because when you're hit with an attack, the first thing you're going to be asked is, was there any sensitive data leaked, et cetera. And then the last piece is TCO. So the cool thing about this is we deliver all these awesome capabilities at usually a 20% or more savings, and that's even after you buy our software, due to how Rubrik transitions and life cycles the data on the back end. And I'll go into an example of that, but we basically we're able to store less data on cheaper tiers of storage, which drives an immediate OpEx savings. This is an example of how we do it in AWS. The top part is AWS backup. This is showing you an example of EC2, but it's the same fundamental concept, whether you're using RDS, an S3 bucket, et cetera. The way AWS backup works is when they take this copy, they have to store it in a warm bucket before they can archive it. And then when they archive it, there's a lot of parameters around needing to send the full every time. It's not very intelligent around compression or deduplication. And this is what you're paying 10 to 20% of your overall cloud bill on. With Rubrik, what our secret sauce is, when we take the backup, we can skip the snapshot altogether and store the data directly into an object storage bucket and still deliver an RTO in hours. And this allows us to be exponentially cheaper than the native tools. So even when you buy our software, it's a self-funding solution that delivers an immediate 20, 30% save. We have lots of customer stories, folks like Under Armour and Pepsi that have saved significant dollars going with Rubrik in the cloud over native tools. And ultimately, Rubrik Security Cloud is a platform, so a lot of folks start with us in the cloud, but you can do some serious tool consolidation when you look at all the different use cases Rubrik delivers across on-prem, multi-cloud data security. So you might start with us in one area, but it is a cost and consolidation play. And we have lots of customers that use us for all of these use cases, as well as some of them, and then, fan across. All right, with that said, I'm gonna pass it over to my boy Bill for a demo. So let me just.
Fantastic. All right, everybody, thanks for having me on. Excited to be here talking about all things Rubrik and data security. I'm going to take you through a quick tour of our capabilities, both from a proactive perspective, right, sniffing out that sensitive data, ensuring that it's secured according to best practices, as well as our cyber resilience capabilities, which are those immutable copies that offer rapid recoverability in the event of a ransomware attack. And then we're going to wrap it up with a little bit of futures, where we're actually going to show the two solutions informing one another in order to enhance a data protection operator's experience in terms of identifying critical data, eliminating redundant data, et cetera, et cetera. So what's on the screen right now is our data security posture module. What this allows you to do is you can link in a variety of data sources, hyperscaler cloud platforms, SaaS apps, data warehouses, et cetera. And we will automatically go out and crawl the entire estate with no impact to production, no requirement for explicit data source linking, and no data egress out of your environment. Once we complete that crawl, we're going to give you an inventory of all data containing assets, and we're going to score those assets according to the overall sensitivity level of the asset, right? So what is the most sensitive piece of information in the asset, as well as how much risk does that asset present to your environment. And that risk is calculated as a byproduct of user access and what we call posture, which is essentially the configuration of the asset housing the data. And so you can see here, we've got a number of data containing assets, things from Azure, things from AWS, a couple of data warehouses. We've gone through, we've determined what data types are present in each of these assets. We've indicated the context that some of the data was found in. We've assigned an overall sensitivity level to the asset, and we've assigned a risk level to the asset. And so you might say, well, how is risk determined, right? And risk is essentially a byproduct of the sensitivity level of the data in the thing and how risky the configuration of the thing is to your environment. As an example here, let me jump over to this violations view, which will give you a peek one level deeper. So what we can see here on the violation screen is that we've got a number of data security violations that have been bubbled up. They fall into a few different categories. We've got data that's overexposed, right? Accessible anonymously to third parties, unprivileged users, et cetera. Data that is unprotected, so maybe logging isn't enabled or encryption isn't enabled, so on and so forth. We've got data that we've identified as misplaced. So a good example here is like GDPR data in the US or something like that, but it could also be within your environment. So it could be sensitive data in a developer environment, things of that nature. And then we've got redundant data. And redundant data is data that is a copy of some production data set, like a backup dump that was found, as well as stale data. So data that is sensitive and no longer in use and probably generating unnecessary cost and unnecessary risk. So when we find sensitive data and we find a misconfiguration or over permissive access that falls into one of these categories, that's what causes us to trigger these violations. And a violation is going to have a criticality level that is commensurate with the risk of the misconfiguration or access pattern, as well as the sensitivity level of the data. So here you can see we've got restricted data that is publicly and anonymously accessible, the old leaky buckets problem, right? Obviously, sort of a clearly bad configuration, an obvious risk, but a good example to kind of drill down into. And if we drill down here into this violation, we're given the ability to introspect the asset itself and determine whether or not the violation is in fact valid, right? Is the sensitive data that we assert to have found actually present in this bucket? We can actually crack open the data containing file and parse it to make sure that it's not a false positive. And then we also offer up some remediation steps. And these remediation steps can be sort of default canned remediation steps, or they can be customized remediation steps that are unique to your environment. There's a number of other capabilities here that we don't have the time to get into. You can jump off to the asset and comb through all of the data. You can, look at all data of a certain category or type exist in the environment. We've got limited time for the demo, and I've got a lot to show you, so I don't want to go too deep here. Other things that are interesting about sort of this proactive component of the solution, there is some real-time detection and response stuff. So if we jump down here to the data threat alerts view, what you'll see is that we're actually monitoring the activity against assets that contain sensitive data, and we're alerting you as the end user whenever those access patterns deviate from a normal baseline. And you can see we've even got some third-party apps here. These are things that you want to scrutinize heavily, right? Because they're external actors in your environment. So what this allows you to do is once you've shored up the environment, secured all the data in accordance with best practices, now you can keep an eye on that sensitive data. And if some user access pattern appears to be drifting from a normal baseline, you can introspect the access and you can determine whether or not maybe this user has been compromised and is being used as a vector to do malicious things in your environment. So that's the proactive piece. I'm going to move now on to the cyber resilience piece. So there's immutable copies and the recoverability aspect of the data, also driven out through Rubrik Security Cloud. Here, it's all about that auto discovery, auto protection, and then the recoverability of the data set, right? So just like we had talked about with the proactive piece, the solution is going to come and it's going to automatically crawl the entire estate, and it's going to discover all of your workloads, regardless of where they reside. So this could be a workload that sits in the cloud. It can be a workload that resides in the data center. It's really all the same from our perspective, all managed through the single pane of glass from a discovery perspective, as well as from a protection and recovery perspective. The general pattern here is very similar. We onboard, subscriptions, accounts, whatever. We discover all the assets within those subscriptions and accounts, and then we allow you to very quickly and easily build protection policy that dictate sort of the RPO and RTO of those workloads. As an example here, I can grab every subscription that I've onboarded. I can manage protection, and I can come here very quickly and easily create a protection policy that aligns with my business requirements. So in this example, I'm just going to do Azure VM. I can define from a frequency and from a retention perspective how often I'd like to protect and how long I'd like to maintain copies at that density. So here I've got a daily recovery point for 30 days, a monthly recovery point for the 11 months after the first 30, and then a yearly recovery point for years 2 and on. Beyond that, we've got the ability to do the data lifecycle thing that Louis mentioned. So this gets you the immutable copies, and it gets you a very cost-efficient backup that will allow you to protect more things while not, blowing your costs out of the water from a consumption perspective. As an example, if I wanted to immediately transition all of these recovery points to just a mutable target, I would just enable this instant archive function, and I would dial back this source local retention to 0. So this is what gets us sort of those 0 warm copies, and all recovery points as defined in the previous step stored in that immutable cost-efficient archive target. And that's really all it takes to build a policy. We have some ability to replicate region to region, subscription to subscription, things of that nature. We've got the ability to lock these policies from a policy perspective, right? So if we turn this lock on, nobody can go reduce the retention in the protection policy in Rubrik Security Cloud after the fact. And then you just give it a name, you give it a description if you'd like, and you can begin using it. Like in this environment, we're not going to protect it for boundary. We're not going to protect at the subscription level. Most of our mappings from a protection perspective in our enterprise customer environments come from these tag rules. And what these tag rules allow you to do is bind a protection level to a tag key and a tag value. And so what happens here is anytime we find a match, we're going to apply the policy as defined in this tag rule. As an example here, if I map to, let's just say, RK user, and I look for all VMs that were created by Dan, right? I can choose which subscription this tag rule would apply to, or I can apply it to all subscriptions that are currently linked, as well as all subscriptions that are linked in the future. So this is extremely powerful because if you already have sort of a tagging paradigm, a good governance around tagging in your cloud environment, these rules will automatically pick up new workloads, they'll automatically pick up new subscriptions, and they will map the appropriate level of protection to the workloads as defined. And so what that ends up giving you is a consolidated inventory of all of your cloud containing assets alongside automatic data protection that aligns to the business requirement of the workload protected. And then from there, this calendar view shows you all days that have a recovery point. It'll show you whether or not the workload has been indexed, so we can recover individual files, individual objects, and whether or not it's been archived off to that low cost immutable target. Regardless of where the workload resides, we get the same recovery options. So I can recover individual files out of this image level snapshot by coming here and quickly searching for the file that I'd like to recover. I can grab one or more files. I can run through the recovery workflow. I can put these files back on the original VM. I can put them on some other VM. I can download them, so on and so forth. Or if I prefer, I can just roll the whole VM back to the point in time selected from a snapshot perspective. Or I can create a copy of that VM in a new environment. And when I choose to do that, I'm given the option to recover this virtual machine to any subscription, any region, regardless of where the data is stored on the front end. This is extremely useful in Azure, where you've got this idea of the regional pairs, and from sort of a native perspective, you've only got the ability to either recover to the source region or to the paired region, and you have to use TRS storage ahead of time. We don't have any of those constraints. Here you can just choose the target that you'd like to recover to, and we'll handle all the data movement and rehydration as necessary. Last thing that I'll touch on from a unification perspective is you sort of saw here in the policies how they can be multi-purpose. But we also have unified event logs and audit logs that show you what's going on from the perspective of Rubrik Security Cloud taking action in your environment, right? That's what the event log is. Here you can see, hey, we're backing up Azure SQL, we're backing up a VM, someone ran a recovery, so on and so forth. We've also got a centralized audit log that'll show you kind of who's doing what on Rubrik Security Cloud. And both of these things are very easy to relay off to a SIM platform like Sentinel or Splunk or whatever your weapon of choice is here. So you can get all this activity across the whole multi-cloud hybrid cloud estate out of Rubrik Security Cloud very easy. And then what good is a data protection solution if it can't inform you as to whether that's still things are protected appropriately. That's where this reporting engine comes in. This will allow you to come in and very quickly run a compliance report, a consumption report, and bubble up those metrics to your stakeholders within the organization with ease. So as an example here, this is the out-of-the-box compliance report. And you can see that we've got a number of workload types protected here, things not in the cloud, things on premises, as well as things in the cloud. And this donut chart is just a quick at-a-glance of which workloads are compliant with their currently attached data protection policies, as well as which are out of compliance. You can schedule these reports to email out periodically. You can run them on demand from the platform here. You can also actually extract the whole backend reporting database from Rubrik Security Cloud using one of our SDKs, and you can visualize it in a tool of your choosing as well. We've looked at the proactive module, right? We've looked at sort of the reactive cyber recovery, cyber resiliency module. A quick peek at where we're going here in the future with the solution is having the two of them inform one another so that you, as an operator focused on data protection, can make sure that you're protecting things that are important all the time and that you're protecting things with the appropriate level of protection so that we're not inflating costs and unnecessarily protecting things. So we've got some of the onboarding workflows here that we'll kind of breeze through. This is just linking up cloud accounts, making sure that all the workloads are discoverable and inventoried. And then at the tail end of that, the functionality is going to be merged together, which will give you a summary of which workloads are protected by native tooling, which workloads are unprotected. Of those workloads that are protected or unprotected, how risky are they to my environment, right? So here you can see kind of like that data protection inventory view, and we're pulling in the sensitivity level of the asset and the risk of the asset to these data protection views. So this gives you a quick on-ramp. Anytime you identify a specific type of data that is critical to your business that you want to protect, you can just filter by sensitivity level, and you can begin assigning protection policies based upon that sensitivity level. And with that, I think we'll wrap it up and jump into Q&A. Hopefully this was useful, showing you how we can both proactively secure your data as well as ensure cyber recovery in the event of an incident.
Okay, great. I think that's it, Bill. Thank you everyone for your time. Talk to you all soon. Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.
All right. Well, thanks to Louis and Bill for putting together a really informative presentation there. We appreciate their time today. And for those of you who ask questions, we will make sure that the Rubrik team gets those so they can follow up with you. And a quick reminder that this is your last chance to grab those handouts before we close the event in a little less than a minute here. And before we wrap up, we have one more piece of business. That's the Amazon gift card prize drawing. And the winner of the $250 Amazon gift card is James DeFrank from Ohio. So congratulations to James DeFrank. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Rubrik for making this event possible. And thanks as always for attending. That's going to conclude today's event. Have a fantastic rest of your day.